Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mind Matters, empowering conversations for public safety professionals, where we'll discuss topics involving wellness and first responders. Join me on this journey of learning from subject matter experts in their various fields of psychology, medicine, leadership, and many more. You can find our show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Let's get into the show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Morris. Welcome back to Mind Matters, the podcast where we explore leadership, resilience, and the human side of high-stakes professions. I'm your host, Elizabeth Morris, along with my co-host, Gary Fly. And I'm especially honored to welcome today's guest. Jason Armstrong is a nationally respected speaker, consultant, and retired police chief with more than 23 years of service in law enforcement. He's taken on leadership roles during times of heightened public attention, including serving as police chief in Ferguson, Missouri, several years after the events that brought the city into the national spotlight. Jason has been inducted into the National Law Enforcement Officer Hall of Fame and is recognized nationally for his work in community engagement and reform. He graduated from the inaugural Obama Foundation USA Leadership Program and has received 40 under 40 honors from both the International Association of Chiefs of Police and his alma mater, Central University. He's the author of the #1 best-selling book, I'm Done Here, which offers a blueprint for leading with intentionality, purpose, even when the work is hard, the change is slow, or the pressure is high. Jason's work today centers on helping leaders at all levels build resilience, create real impact, and lead with the clarity in moments that matter most. So, welcome, Chief Armstrong. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing good, Liz. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. I really appreciate you being here. If we may, let's start with the concept at the core of your work, intentional leadership. How do you define that, and how did it take shape in your career?
I define intentional leadership simply as just being authentic and showing up as you are. One thing that I try to encourage leaders around the country in the work that I do now in consulting and speaking is learning or recognizing the foundation for what their values are or what holds true to them, and using that as source that their leadership leads from. When I was a police chief, I always used the phrase, I don't want people to know or to learn who Chief Armstrong is. I want them to know and to learn who Jason Armstrong is. And if I can get them to like Jason Armstrong, then I could get them to love Chief Armstrong. And so it's really, just trying to lay a foundation and help individuals understand that the more authentic they are and the more that they show up as themselves, that really can fuel the leader that they want to be.
That's wonderful. I agree with you. I think I know in our business, and I think with the relationships we have with clients, but also I encourage our team to be authentic, to be transparent and candid, even when those conversations may be difficult. And I like that, learning who, not so much you as the chief, the title, which comes with its respect, but getting to know you as the person. So, Gary, any thoughts from that? I know we've been talking a lot about leadership and
Yes, I think this whole idea of authenticity and intentionality, right? I think those are so critical, and they go hand in glove, I suppose, in some ways. And so I'm intrigued. When I reviewed your information and read your stuff, I saw navigate change with intentionality, creating positive change. That seemed to be a thread through a lot of the information you've put out there, whether it's your speaking or your writing. And I'm curious sort of how you landed on that, how you've gotten to where you are with these ideas.
Yes, sir. The main thing for me when we talk about having an impact, I always like to put the word positive in front of it, because anybody can have an impact, but it doesn't mean that impact is going to be a good impact. And so when we talk about, what it is that we're trying to do, when we look at the challenges that we're trying to navigate or the obstacles or the hurdles that we're trying to overcome, what are we doing and how we navigate those things to where on the other side of that, it is something that we can see and people can feel that there is a benefit to it, that there is some progress that is going to help them in some kind of way or make their life easier in some kind of way, different things like that. And that was always the aim that I was after. Anybody can come in and change something.
Mm-hmm.
And as a police chief that 2 times came inside an organization from the outside, the number one question that you get is, what are you going to do, or what are the changes that you're going to make? And I always tried to manage expectations in that space, because as an outsider coming in, there's a lot that I have to learn. And one thing that I learned throughout my journey is, just because I had success doing something one way in one police department or in one community, it doesn't automatically mean that that same thing is going to work in the next community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be doing myself and the community and the department a disservice if I just came in and automatically thought that I could just do this, change this, or change that. Because yes, I would be making some change and it would be having an impact, but it wouldn't necessarily be having a positive impact. And that's always what I was after. And so, when you're coming from the outside, people have all these expectations and they want to see all these things and they want to see all of the stuff get done yesterday. A lot of what I had to do in managing expectations is help people understand, there's a process that needs to go into this. And if you just want me to come in and change a bunch of things, like, I can do that, but there's no guarantee that those changes are going to be beneficial for the community, for the department, or for anyone. And so, do you want me to do things fast, or do you want me to do things right? Because there's a very different process that goes into both of those. And that's where the being intentional really comes, into play, where it's knowing and understanding that you're going to face some backlash in the things that you do, whether how fast you try to do things or implement things, or when you see the benefit, or you believe strongly that there will be a benefit in some of the ideas and changes that you want to implement, that are not always the most popular changes, because people can't see what you see, and they can't understand where you're trying to go or where this is going to land down the road and in the future. And that's that's a challenge at times. It was a challenge for me at times, because I am very much a forward outlooking thinker, and the things that I'm trying to put in place today, I understood that, like, I may not be here when these things come to fruition. And
Right.
that's what I think is the hallmark of a leader and of leadership. And I get asked a lot of questions about the title of my book, I'm Done Here, where I try to help people understand is, for leaders, like, I want leaders to think about their time in that leadership seat is going to be for a period of time. And we don't know if that's going to be a long period of time, a short period of time, or what have you. And there's going to come to a point in time where it comes to an end, whether you make that decision for yourself and you say, I'm done here, or whether or not somebody makes that decision for you and says, you are done here. But that's going to come. And when that moment comes, when you look back on your time in that seat, in that position, in that organization with that team, one, can you be proud of what it is that you have done in that time? And do you have any regrets of things that you wish you would have done, or things that you wish you would have tried to do? More importantly, when you are gone, are they set up for sustainable success? Are
Mhm.
things still going to be continuing in a positive upward trajectory, going towards something, positive that's going to be impactful for people? Because if everything comes crashing down the day after you leave, then you didn't do as good a job as you could have done, because a big part of our role as a leader is setting up the organization for sustainable success, whether I am in the leadership seat or somebody else is in it. And so, that's a big part for me, and what my outlook was when I talked about being intentional and being authentic in how I was leading and how I was trying to show up for people.
I,
I was going to ask, can you walk us through a real moment, and what did that look like in action? And you did. Really, that sustainable success speaks volumes. And I'm curious, like, do you ever get to see the fruits of your labor come to fruition? Have you touched base with Apex and, something you implemented? Are they still on that upward trajectory?
Absolutely. And I'll go back farther than Apex. My time as chief in Ferguson, there was something there that I was trying to get done while I was the chief there. And it was a huge fight. And I'm fighting tooth and nail trying to get support for this thing. And I was never able to get it done while I was there. After I come to Apex and I've been here for a couple years, I get a text message one day from one of my former colleagues in Ferguson. And they were like, I thought about you today. So I was just reaching out to check in and see how you were doing. And they said, what made me think about you is I just signed the order to get this thing done. And I remember how hard you were fighting for this. And so I wasn't able to get it done, but the work that I was doing and how I was fighting and advocating for something made it easier and more digestible for it wasn't even the next chief. It was two chiefs after me that was able to get it done, but it got done. And it was something that was needed and that was going to be, just a positive thing for the department and for the officers there in particular, because it was something that they needed. And that's what I was trying to get done. And that's the beauty of it, is when you're doing things for the right reasons. I'm not doing anything for me or for Jason Armstrong. This isn't for my benefit. But when you understand that you're doing it for other people, sometimes you may be able to get it done in a short amount of time. Sometimes it takes a long time, but the only thing that mattered was that it got done. And so, yes, I have, those experiences, and I've had some, and, people have reached out to me years later at times. I share a story in my book about a colleague that I worked with back in Georgia at my first department that reached out to me several years later. And this was somebody that I know I got on their nerves while we worked together, because I was trying to get them to understand, if you want to be a leader in this space, these are certain things that you need to do, or how you need to show up, and things that you need to be mindful of. But they didn't get it at the time. And none of us get it, immediately, or hardly any of us get it, when somebody is trying to import that wisdom and knowledge on us. But fast forward years later, that individual reached out to me just out of the blue. And it's not somebody that I keep in regular contact with, and that individual shared, I've been thinking about my career lately, and I thank you for what you were pouring into me and how you showed up for me. I know we didn't always get along, but I see the value in it now and what it is that you were trying to do. And that's, that for me is the payoff. For all of the challenges and all of the struggles that you deal with when you're a leader, when you're a police chief, and everything, is knowing that, if you're being intentional about trying to lift up others and support others and pour into them to help them reach their maximum potential, that, seeing that come to fruition for a lot of people makes it all worth it.
And pushing forward even when it's frustrating, and knowing that it most likely won't come to fruition while you're there. I mean, again, working for city and state government, we know how slow things can go. But I think that speaks volumes about you, that you didn't necessarily need the accolades and the attaboy, but just knowing that passion project happened, and for the greater good. I'm sure, I mean, that speaks to also your level of resilience. How do you model resilience when you're the one feeling stretched thin, whether it's a passion project or you're feeling like you're not getting everybody on board to help? How do you lead others while navigating that level of stress and pushback from outside people?
The concept that I used throughout my career was just make it to the end of the day. As leaders, there's so much that's on our shoulders at times, and we carry the weight of all of that. And not just at work, we carry it at home, we carry it in our personal lives. And sometimes it's just as simple as trying to take things one day at a time. And as simple as it sounds, like, it is extremely hard to do, especially when the challenges are coming up one after another and over again. But just really trying to focus on the day and the things that are in front of you, and what you can impact. Like, I don't like to use the word control, because my career taught me that I wasn't in control of much of anything. And there's so many factors that are at play. And so I never looked at it as control what you can control and all of those things, but just what I have an opportunity to impact, and focusing on that and the things that I absolutely had no control over, or little, impact over, just trying to do what I could in the moment. And inevitably, I believe every leader is going to have a moment or moments where things are put into perspective for them that helps them kind of navigate, like, what am I doing this for? Is this all worth it? And all of those things. And for me, my time in Ferguson, dealing with all of the things that I had to deal with up there, That moment came for me at home. And it was the result of my 5-year-old daughter at the time, when she asked my wife one day, how come daddy is never happy when he sees us? And she was asking that question from the perspective of when I got home at the end of the day every day. I never had a smile on my face. There was nothing, there was nothing happy or exciting about me because I was beat down every day. I mean, that's what being a chief largely is. But getting that aha moment from a 5-year-old, that helped me, try to work on putting things in better perspective and knowing, all right, when I walk through this door, regardless of how I'm feeling or how bad my day was, I have to show up for her in a way that she knows that she's just as important to me and all of those things. So having some personal moments like that for me helped me in my career and helped me navigate the challenges of being a police chief in difficult times, where I really just looked at it. If I can just make it home, and I know I have to put a smile on my face when I get home, you start to figure out the ways to manage and understand that all of this stuff is going to be waiting for me when I come back tomorrow. And so trying not to let it beat you down so much, because when you do allow it to beat you down on that end, people see it. And then that's when you're not operating, as your best self. And it's harder, to show up for other people if you're not pouring into yourself how you need to pour into yourself.
And kids are the first one to put up that mirror, aren't they, Gary? We were
Yeah.
just talking about
Yes.
your granddaughter too.
Right.
She's reflecting. Gary was sharing about his almost 1-year-old granddaughter. Anytime someone comes into a room and in her crib, she just lights up. And you attest that to being like her interactions with people. They've all been
Right.
positive, right, Gary? Is that what she said? And
Right.
so it is a
Yeah.
reflection of what we're bringing.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so that leads me to think about, you started this conversation about talking about intentionality. And what I heard you say is, I'm intentional about positive change. I'm intentional about lifting others up. I'm intentional about leaving a system better and sustainable and ready to go. I'm also intentional about my ability to control things. And I wonder, how do you impart that? That's a lot of wisdom. That whole idea of intentionality to me is very wise. How do you impart that? How do you teach others to do these things? How do you train them? What do you talk about with young officers and whatnot?
One of the big things for me that I learned throughout my journey in this profession was the impact that you have on people that leads to the results that you want to see in whatever task or objective that you're trying to achieve. One thing that helped me understand this and really put it in perspective, and I have a diagram, if you will, in my book of a triangle. It's almost shaped like a pyramid. And what it's highlighting is when we first start out, it's about our technical skills. Like that's what we have to learn in this profession. And I think largely in most professions is you have to get proficient at whatever the job is. And so we're laser focused on the technical aspect of what it is that we do and building up the skills so we can become proficient and be good at that. And for most people, if you're good enough at it, and you display that, then that puts you in situations where you have opportunities to climb or to get promoted or to take on additional roles and responsibilities. And as I started to get promoted, what I learned is it started to become less and less about my technical skills and more about my people skills. One, I can laugh at it now. It wasn't funny when it happened, but when I first got promoted to sergeant, so my first promotion, it took me less than 2 weeks before I got wrote up for messing something completely up. And what I messed up had to deal with my outlook and approach to a situation and how it was impacting two individuals. There were two officers that worked there. One was assigned to my team, a subordinate of mine. The other one was on a different team, but they had conflict that had gone on for years, I guess, and something had happened where some words were exchanged and somebody said something. So the officer that worked for me came and told me about it and asked me to do something about it. And it was so trivial. I mean, we're talking, this was like junior high school level bantering was my interpretation of it. So when I went to go talk to the other officer, I was very nonchalant and very cavalier. And I just had a very matter of fact conversation like, look, this is childish. Knock this crap off. Well, that individual didn't take too kindly to the complaint that the other officer made. So then it turned into this big thing, and a complaint was filed, and all of these other things. And then my part in it was I didn't handle it appropriately as the supervisor in that whole mix of how I was trying to address the issue. And the specific complaint on me in that was I approached it as if it wasn't important to me and it wasn't worth my time. And when they talked to me about it, I said, you're 100% right, because I thought it was childish, and I thought, I thought it was stupid that I was having to address this with adults that are older than me. And I remember that was the big sticking point for me was both of y'all are older than me. Like I shouldn't have to referee two adults to get along. But my people skills in managing that were horrible. Mm-hmm. So, having that experience and getting written up 2 weeks after I got promoted was a good eye opener for me. Just what would be my journey throughout my career as I climbed the ranks and ultimately landed into the chief seat, where I was always trying to preach to individuals the power of connectedness, and how, regardless of what it is that we're trying to accomplish, connectedness between one another is what's going to help us accomplish our individual goals. And that part right there is what's hard for a lot of people to see. And the work that I do now, coming into organizations and working with leadership teams or executive teams, is trying to help them understand, how whatever their goals are, how they can go about accomplishing them better if they are looking out for the team and for the whole more than they're looking out for themselves, because that is what can separate them from some of the others. If they understand that concept of, it's not about me outshining the next person. If I can show how I'm supporting everybody, that's going to make me look just as good as anybody else in this process, but it's going to help the organization. It's going to help the whole much better than if I'm just out looking for myself or trying to shine and trying to get all of the accolades and everything that comes with it. And one of the things that I lean on with that being my approach is I have a lot of accolades that I've received throughout my career, where I can try to show and help, up and comers or aspiring leaders that you can do it this way, and you can still achieve greatness. You can still achieve your wildest dreams in this profession or whatever profession that you're in, by having that approach to it, and not just coming from it, from the lane of, it's just me. How can it be all about me?
Yeah. And I think people spot that, right? They know, your coworkers know, those people you're associating with, they suss that out pretty quickly. And again, this idea of being intentional around lifting others up, about creating positive change, people also feel that, right? Just as equally as they do.
For me, what I had to learn, and my biggest curve in that was, how I go about doing that with people that didn't have regular experiences with me, because I had a very laser focus throughout my career. The first meeting that I had with the chief that hired me at my first department at 21 years old, the first conversation I ever had with that chief, I told him my goal was to be the police chief. Like I knew I wanted that from day one. And so having that laser focus, like I didn't come into the profession looking to make friends and to be, just this real social person. I was about the business of it. Now, everybody on my team saw how I showed up for them, and they all loved me. But like, if you didn't get to experience that of us working together, then people felt I was real standoffish and I didn't talk a whole lot and all of those other things. And for me, it was because I had the laser focus. But I was learning how some people, they had perceptions of me in that way. And so I had to learn, like, okay, all right, I gotta, I have to get out of my headspace at times and learn how to relax around some other people and other things, so they could get to experience some of what my teammates experience all the time, because we work together every day. And so it's things that you will learn throughout the journey that can help you learn how to the best navigate that, where you're trying to accomplish your things and you're trying to support the people that are closest to you, but also having to be mindful of how you're seen and viewed by others, and trying to help educate them or show them what's factual and what's real versus what's perception.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to your pyramid, right? It's like, okay, technical skills are sort of the price of entry. You got to be competent. You got to be able to do what you're doing. But as you progress, it's these soft skills, these people skills, the ability to work in a group, the ability to impart trust and build goodwill because you do have these real desires to help others and help the team grow that you start to be cognizant of. And I think that's a great sort of aha for folks at any point in their career to be reminded of.
Yeah, because I definitely didn't have all of that starting out, and it was
Mhm.
definitely something that grew with me, as I grew in the profession.
I think even frontline officers, I mean, coming to those people skills, those soft skills. I mean, I know you've had probably numerous amounts of training on, diffusing situations, but I think learning those communication skills early on does everyone a service, and particularly the community. And it makes me think about my colleague and I are working through a book called Nonviolent Communication, and where really understanding, leading with empathy, like listening and not coming in to immediately solve a problem, but again, kind of back to the high school or junior high situation with people, like that was important to them. They were perceiving like something was not right, and it was their
Hmm.
needs were not being met in some way. But then coming in from an outsider, you're like, come on, guys and gals, like we got to keep moving. And
Yes.
we have to remind ourselves to take that time to just sit and listen, even though we're going, I got a meeting, I got this, the commissioner wants to talk to me, whatever it is. But it sounds like you've definitely honed in on those skills and are teaching that to the younger people. So yeah, Gary, did you have a follow up to that? I didn't want to mess up your
No,
flow.
what but I really, the way you sort of visualized it for us with that pyramid idea and this growth,
Mhm.
I think is important. And as you think about new officers coming into the field, I mean, you clearly had a laser focus, but what sort of advice are you giving them? How are you? I mean, the things have changed, right? It's a different world than it was, right, when you entered. And how does somebody best position themselves, or what might a officer new in their career be thinking about and whatnot? I'm curious what sort of advice you would give them.
Yes, the profession is a very different place than what it was when I came into it almost 25 years ago. And there are a lot of things that have made the profession better during that time and that time span, but there are a lot of things that have added challenges,
Mm-hmm.
for the new officers that are coming in. The advice that I would always give my new officers when they started, I would always have a meeting with them just to talk about my expectations as a chief, and what our mission was and what we were trying to accomplish as an organization. And number one for me was always the community. Like I want all of us to find ways or look for ways that when we have interactions or when we're making decisions, everything that we're doing, I wanted us to be thinking about how is this going to help the community? How is this going to benefit the community? So community over self was kind of my outlook on it, and what I wanted young officers to be thinking about as they about their day in the calls for service or the traffic stops, or whatever it was that they were doing, always thinking about the community, and how could we have a positive impact on the community. One thing that I felt that newer officers benefited most from was seeing examples of what met the expectations, and so just sharing different things with them that had happened, so they could try to digest it a little bit easier of what I was talking about, instead of just saying having an impact on something. And one thing that I loved is when community members would reach out to me to thank an officer that they had an interaction with. And especially when they had an interaction with an officer that they didn't expect the officer to handle it, how the officer handled it, and in a positive way. I remember somebody mailed me a handwritten note to the PD one day telling me about an interaction they had with an officer, and this officer had stopped them for speeding. And you don't often see somebody getting pulled over for speeding and that ending in them sending a handwritten note to the chief that
No,
is a compliment and that is
unless it's a
positive.
complaint, right?
Exactly. And what happened, I still remember it. Heck, I think I might even still have that note somewhere. But what this community member was highlighting in the note is they admitted that they were speeding, They got off work late and they was trying to get to their kids' sporting event. And I can't remember what sport it was, but when the officer got up to the car, said, "Hey, I stopped you for speeding." The person says, "I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I got off work late. I'm trying to get to my kid's sporting event. You know, it's important for them that I show up and that they see me there and all of those things." And what happened was that officer, their kid played the same sport.
Huh.
And so the door was open for them to be able to have a genuine exchange. And that's the intentionality of things that I was always trying to get people to understand that we were after is if somebody cracks a door where you can have a moment with them, always take advantage of that. And so that officer just had a real short conversation with the individual. I get it. Like I know what it's like getting off work late and trying to show up and trying to be there. And I know all of the games and all the travel and how much a burden it is on a parent and all this other things. And I don't even remember if the officer wrote the individual a ticket or not. It wasn't about the ticket. It wasn't about being stopped. What the person appreciated in that moment was that the officer took the time to have a genuine exchange with them. And that's what they valued out of that whole ordeal. That person is probably never going to forget that exchange and that interaction that they had with that officer. That's positive impact. And so being able to put stories and put experiences and examples to that, that's what I found has helped younger officers, help, just trying to get it to click. When you're a new officer, you have so much to learn and it is so stressful of one doing this job and what you signed up to do. And then we throw a policy manual at you that is 1,000 pages long and we tell you got to learn all this stuff because if you mess up anything in here you're going to be in trouble. Like all of those things, it's overwhelming. I always wanted them to, just take a step back for the things that's overwhelming because you're never going to memorize everything. Like, I just need you to know where to go to get the answers to things and know that I expect you to go do that before you make a wrong decision when you have time to go get the answers. But more importantly, what I want you to focus on day in and day out is when you come into contact with somebody, when you have an interaction with somebody, how during your time with them, what can you give them in that space that can lead to them being better off than what they were when you got there. And that's not just somebody that you're doing a good deed for. Even the people that have committed crimes that we have to arrest or we have to cite for offenses and things, like there is a way that you can go about doing that with those individuals as well, where you don't have to treat them less than. You don't have to treat them less than, and you can hold people accountable. And I was always about accountability. And so none of this is about giving people a pass on anything. Like accountability is what we do inside the organization and outside the organization. But you can still do that in a way where you're not hurting people. And that was what I was always trying to impart. Or when I talk to young officers today, or individuals that attend any of my speaking events and things, is trying to get them to understand how you can go about getting everything accomplished that you need to get accomplished, but you leave people in a better place. And that's I think that's what we need to see more of, and that's what the community really wants from us as a whole.
Agree. Just not don't lose the human factor. We're all humans, and find that connection when you can, and that empathy, while also remembering those on the job tactical skills when you need to apply them. But we're all human and we're in this life together. I like that.
And just last week, I was up in Chicago doing some consulting work, and I was having a conversation with a youth group up there. And this young lady, she said exactly what you just said, Liz. And we were talking about police community interactions and how use of force escalates and all of those things. And the young lady asked the question, she was like, when do police officers, at what point do they stop being police officers and become human? Like that's what we want to see from them. And that's what, we need more officers to understand of how you can show up as your authentic self and find ways to allow that to be how you help people or how you can have a positive impact on people and different things like that. And that's always what I was after.
Yeah, be that peace officer, right? We know in certain areas of the world, that's what law enforcement is called. They're called peace officers. And I just think that translates so well. I wish we could just, change those titles. And I think just in itself, it sometimes diffuses. I'm peace officer Jason Armstrong. I'm peace, where it removes some of the robotic feel almost. It brings more of that
Got you.
human piece to it. But yeah, so I want to switch gears real quick. And Gary, unless you have a question related to this.
No, I think it's good. That's good.
Good kind of transition over to the book, because first of all, I didn't know you wrote a book. I'm not sure when you had time to do that, from the time you retired and also doing the speaking engagements. But I mean, like, why did you write it? Like, who did you write it for? Were you just like, I need to take everything that's in my head and get it down on paper, or like what was your thinking there?
Ever since I got the chief job in Ferguson, people have been talking to me about I need to write a book. Now, at first, I think people wanted me to write a book because they wanted me to answer the question, like, how in the world did you get that job? Because it was like, man, you came out of nowhere. Like, nobody knew who you were. You came from this department in Georgia that nobody ever heard of. And then you're the police chief in Ferguson. And so I think that was how it started. And then they saw what my life was and what my experiences were in Ferguson, and having, the riots and trying to burn down the police department and everything after George Floyd was killed. And so the more that I started speaking, the more I started getting asked by individuals, do you have a book, or when is your book coming out? Because, just my story and what my journey was in the profession, people were very intrigued by it. I got the chief job in Ferguson while I was still in my 30s. And that was another thing that a lot of people, like, how did you get such a big job at such a young age? So, people have been on me for years to write a book. And at the end of 23, I knew I was going to retire in 2024. And so I started working on the book then. And so I retired October 31st, and I released the book November 1st. And so the
Okay.
title of the book just worked out all that was done strategically. The
Right.
next day I released a book called I'm Done Here. But it's not about retiring. I explained, it's about the leadership seat as a whole. But I strongly felt as though anybody in any profession, this is not a police book. That's why there's no police title on it. You don't see me in uniform on it or anything, because I really viewed this project as helping anybody who is an emerging, an aspiring, or a current leader, that they could benefit from reading this and getting some of the lessons learned, some of the mistakes that were made, some of the challenges that I had to navigate, because the challenges never stop coming. Doesn't matter what profession you're in, what industry, you're always going to have challenges that you have to navigate. Now, it is my hope and prayer for everyone that they're not navigating challenges of their life being in danger all of the time. But that was always kind of what I looked at whenever I would reflect on the things that I had experienced in my career. I strongly felt, if these leadership principles that are guiding me can lead me through life and death situations, then somebody who lives in the corporate world, or somebody who works in higher education, or what have you, this could easily help them navigate some of the challenges, that they're having to navigate. And so that was largely why I put the book out. And as I was preparing for retirement, and I was already speaking, I already had my business, but I knew I was going to be doing a lot more of that. And then a lot of the guidance that you get is, you need to have a book out to go along with your speaking career, because that helps, add some relevance to what it is that you're talking about. So just decided that was the perfect time to put it out as I was retiring and going into act two, if you will, with my consulting and speaking business.
That's great. And it's evident that you have a great support system around you, particularly if your family allowed you to lock yourself up in a room for a month to write to write a book.
So it took me I started working on it in either January or February of 24, and I probably got it done around August, September, and we released it November 1st.
Yeah. So that, I think that it's between the stories you've told here and the information in the book. I think you provide just a really rich set of ideas and principles, not only for law enforcement, right? For just people living their lives. I loved a couple of the themes that you came back to us several times: community over self, genuine exchange of human to human. It's not about Chief Armstrong, it's about getting to know Jason, right? You said that early on. This idea of
Mhm.
positive change. Change for change's sake isn't helpful to anybody, but positive change leads to something. And then showing up with intentionality. I mean, those, to me, you've said a lot of really interesting things, but those four kind of ideas hit me really powerfully today. And I know that there's more, again, in your book and in the speaking that you do, but I think that you create a framework and a foundation for people just to live a better life and have richer experiences and whatnot.
Some
And
tactical take homes, right?
yeah,
So, Jason, I'm not going to say Chief Armstrong. Jason, thank you. Your work and your voice continue. I know you're making space for hard conversations and really helping leaders, but also those younger officers. And I'm just really grateful that you could join us, because it's been a while since I've seen you. So it's great to see your face. And for our listeners, if you haven't picked up I'm Done Here, I encourage you to do so. It's, again, like Gary was saying, it's full of insight and, wisdom and clarity. And you can also learn more about Jason's work at, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Jason Armstrong.
Jason P. Armstrong. You have to
Jim,
put the P in there.
thank you for correcting.
Yes.
JasonPArmstrong.com.
Yes.
And just, yeah, thank you for being here, and thanks to y'all for tuning in to Mind Matters. And if today's episode resonated with you, please subscribe, share it, leave a review. But please look for Jason Armstrong on LinkedIn. Is there, and before we close, are any upcoming speaking opportunities that folks you can share with where you'll be next?
Yes. Next week, I will be at Noble's annual conference down in Hollywood, Florida. So I'll be speaking there multiple days, and I forget where I'm next after that, but
But we
I'm
can find
somewhere.
you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah, you go to my website, and all of my upcoming engagements are listed on my website.
wonderful. Well, until next time, lead well and lead with intention, and we will talk soon. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Mind Matters. Please give us your thoughts, and if you like this episode, feel free to share it with others. You can also find more content and choose to follow us on our Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at the FMRT Group. Thanks, and we'll see you next time on Mind Matters.